Now, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage the world as governments rush against time to arm populations with the biggest weapon, the COVID-19 vaccine. But even as this happens, the pandemic has led governments, employers, workers, and the general population to face unprecedented challenges that has in fact seen major shifts in the world of work. Shifts to new forms of working arrangements and widespread reliance on teleworking. But this has not stopped the potential occupational safety and health risks posed to workers. How do we deal with this? On the 28th of April this year, the World Day for Safety and Health at Work will be marked across the globe, focusing majorly on strategies to strengthen national occupational safety and health systems rather. And on this special episode of The Front Row, we tell you why all this matters to you, whether you're a worker, an employer, or even a stakeholder in government. How do we anticipate, prepare, and respond to crisis? We'll tell you all about that on the show this hour. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I am Akisa Wandera. Glad you could be part of this show. Remember, you can always join us with the hashtag The Front Row at Akisa Wandera at KTN News KE. You can as well text us on 22155. Any questions to the panelists we have here? Any comments as you participate on the show? I'd be glad to read them out as we continue with the program. But first things first, let's begin with our panelists. Who do we have on the show this hour? Engineer Peter Tum was appointed by His Excellency the President Uhuru Kenyatta to his current position as a Principal Secretary of State, Department for Labour in the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection on the 1st of March 2019. Prior to his current appointment, Engineer Tum served as the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Health. He holds a master's degree in energy management from the University of Nairobi, a Bachelor of Industrial Technology from Egerton University, and a postgraduate diploma in medical electronics from the University of London. Engineer Tum comes with a wealth of experience, having previously served as a Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Medical Training College, KMTC. Thank you, Engineer Tum, for joining us on the program. Second, and here with me in studio is Dr. Musa Nyandusi, who's the Secretary of Occupational Safety and Health Services at the Directorate of Occupational Safety and Health Services. He's a researcher in occupational safety and health with special interests in occupational diseases and their compensation. And we're glad to have you here to just take us through this very important topic that perhaps we don't get to talk about often. Well, not new to the show, we also have Jacqueline Mugo, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Federation of Kenyan Employers, FKE, a lawyer by profession with specialization in labor laws and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with decades of experience in legal, human resources, corporate governance and leadership. She's the first Kenyan woman to head the Federation and the employers' body on the African continent. Thank you, Ms. Mugo, for joining us on the show. And finally, Ernest Nadome is the first Assistant Secretary General of KOTU, Kenya. Nadome is a former chairman of the Board of Trustees for the KenGen Defined Contribution Scheme. He's also the Secretary General of the Kenya Electrical Trades and Allied Workers Union, KETAU, a position he has held for the past 16 years. It's very good to have you on the program. Well, let's now get into the conversation. Remember, just a quick reminder again, for any contribution, any questions to our panelists, do text us on 22155, tweet us at Akisa Wandera, at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is The Front Row. As we continue with the program, I'd love to also have your contribution. As I always say, this is your show too. So let's now get on to it, and perhaps let's start with Engineer Peter Tum. And I started by saying this pandemic caught the world flat-footed, and workers have been a big contributor to how things have moved. Number of infections in offices as well. I'm imagining we had to put things in place really quickly to deal with this. Speak to us about that, on what we needed to do immediately the pandemic came to just try and protect workers, and what laws we are using.
Thank you very much, Akisa, and thank you for having me in this show. The pandemic got us flat-footed, like you rightly said, and what happened? Am I on? Off.
Please go on.
Thank you, Akisa. Yeah, like I was saying, I think, yes, you are right. When the pandemic visited us last year, it got us flat-footed. But what really happened is that the government quickly put in place mechanisms to ensure that we had mitigating strategies, particularly for the workers and who are going to be affected by the same. I don't know whether I'm on, Akisa.
On. Quick one. Can you hear yourself? Are you having problems with an echo?
Now I'm hearing myself. I don't have an echo at all.
Just continue. We are fixing that. My apologies. Just continue as we're fixing that.
So what happened, Akisa, is that we put in place mitigating, strategies to ensure that workers then were not affected to the level that was being anticipated. And thank you. Let me take this opportunity to thank the togetherness that we had with our social partners, namely COTU and FKE. And what we did is to ensure that, although we had the labor laws that were then there, this is a new phenomenon that had just come in, and we needed to put in place some sort of regulations. And we borrowed what ILO had put in place, and we signed an agreement, an MOU, a tripartite MOU, which then allowed workers to work from home. Those who were affected, the enterprises that were affected, we allowed them to pay probably half salaries. Those who are not taken their leave, So there were all this that we needed to do in order to ensure that we cushioned our workers. Did we succeed? Yes, we did. We did. Although we've lost very many lives, Akisa, particularly in the workplaces, you realize that then we had to revamp the occupational safety and health strategy so that the workplaces, despite the pandemic, were safe for those workers who then were allowed to work in those places. And remember, working as one government, the Ministry of Health had given us the protocols which were being implemented by our occupational safety and health. So we had a myriad of intervention measures. Of course, I won't be able to name all of them, but remember His Excellency the President put in place also mitigation measures in terms of on the economic side. But in the Ministry of Labor, we worked so well, and I think it has helped us up to now.
At this point, let me bring in Dr. Nyandusi. They're looking at the past 1 year. The Directorate of Health Services and Occupational Safety has been key in a lot of companies. What role have you played as a department in combating COVID-19, especially in workplaces?
Thank you, Akisa. That's an excellent question. Maybe first let me contextualize what the department is, and then it might be easier to explain the role that we've had in the workplace. The Directorate of Occupational Safety and Health is a department within the State Department for Labor, which is charged with two primary responsibilities. The first responsibility is to ensure the safety and health of workers in their respective workplaces. And the second responsibility that we have is to administer work injury benefits to those workers who get injured or suffer get disability from work injuries and occupational diseases. And we derive this mandate from the two legislations, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, as well as the Work Injury Benefits Act. So you can see the issue of COVID-19 is as much a health issue as much as it is a safety and health issue in the workplace. And to this end, this disease was first described in 2019, sometime in November initially, then eventually December. And in March, His Excellency the President did put in place a raft of measures to be able to mitigate the general population.
Right.
Just prior to that, we had issued an advisory to workplaces regarding the continued safety and health, with particular focus on the COVID-19 pandemic. And in this initial advisory, of course, we spoke about the issue of employers, where possible, to create mechanisms of persons who may work from home to work from home. We asked that we review our transportation policies and procedures for workers who are coming from work, getting into the workplace, and also to conduct health risk assessments in the workplaces so that we can mitigate on the spread of this virus in the workplace. And I think that was well taken, and we did have a lot of workplaces actually indeed doing health risk assessments and giving us the requisite reports. Subsequent to that, we singled out the persons with disability as a special group who are actually at higher risk than the rest of the population. And we again did give an advisory, which was again well taken by the workplaces in being able to achieve that. And finally, we also gave, at the time when now we were reopening the last time, we did give an advisory on mitigating the workplaces on the risks that are there during reopening. So it is a challenging time. Right. Everything is, every advisory is subject to the rapid happenings in the workplace. And currently, of course, we are reviewing the issue of vaccination in consultation with our colleagues at the Ministry of Health, the inoculation of workers, as well as the necessity of screening, as we look towards keeping the workplace going.
So it's an ongoing process.
It will always be an ongoing process.
Right. You've mentioned that these are mechanisms that you put in place, and employers clearly have been very key to ensure that this is achieved in terms of rescheduling how people work. I want to bring in Ms. Mugo at this point. How has this worked so far?
Well, by the time that COVID-19 descended on us in the first quarter of last year, we were already working with the Directorate to look at health and safety issues. Health and safety has been a major issue throughout because as Kenya, the level of awareness has not been very high. We have not invested in it. So there have been difficulties between what the law says and what the levels of compliance and the readiness of enterprises have been. So COVID-19 came to make an already difficult situation even more difficult. And as FKA, we moved immediately into formulating protocols, guidelines to help employers. They were asking questions, so we've been asked to allow people to work from home, which we supported. But how does that work? The enterprise is not functional. What is the employer's responsibility on disclosure? What measures should we take to ensure that people can work from home? What are the health and safety issues when people are working from home? And we developed guidelines on our own and then realized the government itself was coming up with guidelines through DOSH. Of course, the Ministry of Health already had the guidelines that they were issuing. So all these protocols and guidelines were able to help. And we had to partner with the Directorate. We actually serve on the DOSH board. We have a representative there. So the work that they were doing complemented what the Federation was doing in answering questions that were changing on a daily basis. And employers up to today, of course, because business has never resumed, has never gone back to normal, are still grappling with many different permutations of health and safety issues at the workplace. Health and safety is an important component of enterprise performance. You need to have a healthy workforce for you to perform, to meet your targets, to enhance productivity. But when that workforce is under stress because they don't know whether their job will disappear today or tomorrow, they don't know whether they're going to contract COVID, and so the workplace has become a very important platform for enhancing health and safety and for implementing all the protocols that the government has put in place because it enhances the awareness of the employees and their capacity to protect themselves. So the partnership between us and the Directorate becomes even more important as we grapple with the safe return to work, and even as we are now in the third wave, addressing issues of how do you actually conduct work. There are lots of requirements that are in the law, but enterprises are also struggling. So it's an ongoing and ever-evolving scenario. But as a country, I think we need to move forward to invest in health and safety and to ensure that which is envisaged in law is made possible through capacity building, and through laws and regulations that can be implemented over time.
Mr. Nadome, let me speak to you at this point on how beneficial this has been for workers over the past 1 year. What have we heard?
Thank you very much, Akisa. Maybe I need to correct in the introduction. You said that I'm the former chairman of the Kenyan Pension Scheme. Not really. I am still the chairman, and you're also very economic in the introduction, but I hope you'll regularize that later. Anyway, back to the issue of the pandemic. I think, as first and foremost, let me mention that immediately the pandemic was with us, the Ministry of Labour organized a high-level meeting where COTU, FKA, our social partners, and the government, the tripartite partners were involved. That is where now we came up with a raft of measures that will help workers, or rather employers, mitigate the effect of this pandemic. That worked out well. Now, whether it was beneficial or not, what I would want to say to some extent, because as workers, we embraced it, and immediately that communique or that MOU was signed, we circulated to our officials up to the level of the shop steward. One, I know in terms of benefit, to some extent, some of employers were able to implement it to the letter. Issues that have been raised about work arrangement, employees working in shift, the issues of observing social distance, issues about putting on masks, and all that. I think quite a number of employers embraced that, and because it was also to the benefit of the employers. The only area, maybe challenge I will say, is that it is one thing to have these measures in place, and it's a different thing altogether to have it implemented to the full. And this goes back to the enforcement muscle of the Ministry of Labour. I know the Ministry of Labour means well, they have good intentions, like DOSH. DOSH is an institution, a government department that has really tried its level best. But when it comes to enforcement, that's another challenge. I think maybe something I will mention later, because as I even mentioned last year, the same problem that bedeviling the ministry, they have not changed. Instead, I will say they have even worsened. For them now even to supervise, do inspection. For employers doing that, it's difficult to say that. But from our research, the report we got at COTU, quite a number of employers benefited. But there are other aspects of job, I think that's a different thing. But on matters health and safety, in respect of this pandemic, I think there was a concerted effort by all employers to embrace this agreement.
Right, and you raised some issues, and I'll give you more time when we get back from the break to just talk to us about that and the challenges you're talking about. I want us now to take a quick break. You're watching The Front Row. Remember, this is, we'd love for you to be part of this conversation as well. At Akisa Wandera at KTN News KE. The hashtag to use is The Front Row. We'll be back with that conversation and more. Stay with us.